The Black Death wasn't just history's deadliest pandemic, it completely transformed medieval society. From medicine to economics, art to science, this devastating disease forced Europe to rebuild itself from the ground up. Let's explore how one bacteria changed everything. Picture this. It's the 1300s, and medieval Europe is more connected than ever thanks to bustling trade routes. Merchants travel far and wide, bringing exotic goods from Asia. But unfortunately, they're carrying something else too. Cities are crowded, streets are filled with waste, and rats are having a field day. No one understands germ theory yet, so people are living right next to their garbage and sewage. Add to this the fact that most people rarely bathed, and you've got the perfect conditions for disease to spread. The Silk Road, which usually brought precious spices and fabrics, became a superhighway for bacteria. Ships filled with infected rats and fleas sailed from port to port, while trade caravans carried the disease deep inland. It was like setting up dominoes. Once the first case hit, nothing could stop the chain reaction. When the plague hit a town, panic spread faster than the disease itself. Imagine entire neighborhoods emptying overnight as terrified residents fled to the countryside. Those who could afford it escaped to private estates, while others sought refuge in forests and fields. Cities transformed into eerie ghost towns with only the sick, the brave caregivers, and the dead remaining. Some communities tried burning everything, houses, belongings, even entire districts, in desperate attempts to stop the spread. In places like Venice, officials created the first quarantine systems, forcing ships to wait 40 days before entering port. The word quarantine actually comes from 40 giorni, Italian for 40 days. Priests walked abandoned streets, their carts piled high with bodies as they called out, "Bring out your dead." It was a scene straight out of a nightmare, but for medieval Europeans, this was their new reality. Let's talk about medieval doctors and their bizarre-looking plague outfits. Those famous beak-like masks weren't just for show. They were stuffed with herbs and spices because physicians believed bad smells caused disease. These plague doctors wore long leather coats, gloves, and crystal eyepieces, looking more like scary birds than medical professionals. Their methods were just as strange as their appearance. They'd try everything from bloodletting with leeches to having patients drink ground emeralds or sit next to a live chicken. Some doctors recommended fighting the plague by balancing the body's humors through special diets, while others suggested drinking gold particles or wearing magical amulets. While these treatments seem ridiculous now, they show how desperately medieval society tried to fight an enemy they couldn't understand. Without microscopes or germ theory, they were essentially fighting blind, using the best tools their understanding of the world allowed. The massive death toll of the Black Death had a surprising silver lining. It completely reshuffled the economic deck. With nearly half of Europe's population wiped out, surviving peasants suddenly found themselves in high demand. For the first time, they could negotiate better wages and working conditions. Landowners, desperate for workers, had to offer higher pay and more freedom. This sparked the rise of a new middle class, as skilled craftsmen and merchants gained unprecedented wealth and status. The feudal system, which had kept peasants bound to their lords for centuries, began crumbling. Some peasants even abandoned their traditional lands to become wandering laborers, taking the highest-paying jobs they could find. Women also entered the workforce in greater numbers, taking on roles traditionally reserved for men. It's fascinating. A catastrophic plague accidentally created the first hints of what we'd now call workers' rights. When disaster strikes, humans often look for someone to blame, and during the Black Death, this instinct led to horrific consequences. Jewish communities became primary targets as rumors spread that they were poisoning wells or causing the plague through dark magic. In many cities, entire Jewish neighborhoods were attacked and burned, with thousands of innocent people murdered. The Church, struggling to explain the catastrophe, pointed fingers at heretics and women suspected of witchcraft. Some religious groups even blamed themselves, forming groups of flagellants who wandered from town to town, whipping themselves bloody to appease what they saw as God's wrath. This dark chapter shows how fear and ignorance can turn neighbors against each other. creating cycles of violence that echo through history. The Black Death left an indelible mark on European art and literature, sparking a fascinating cultural revolution. Artists began creating memento mori, artworks reminding viewers of their mortality. You've probably seen the famous Dance of Death paintings, showing skeletons dancing with people from all social classes. A stark reminder that death comes for everyone, rich or poor. Literature took a dramatic turn too, with writers like Boccaccio penning The Decameron, featuring stories of plague survivors seeking refuge in storytelling. Even the English language changed, with new words and phrases entering common use. Biting the dust and Saved by the Bell actually originated from plague-time practices. Churches filled with artwork depicting the triumph of death, while poetry became more focused on life's fleeting nature. It's remarkable how this devastating disease ended up creating some of medieval Europe's most enduring artistic masterpieces. The massive death toll of the Black Death didn't just reshape population numbers, it completely upended the social order. With roughly half of Europe's population gone, the surviving peasants suddenly held unprecedented bargaining power. Think about it. There weren't enough people left to work the fields, which meant landowners had to compete for workers. Peasants could now demand better wages, improved living conditions, and even the freedom to move between estates. Some clever farmers started their own businesses, while others learned specialized trades. The old feudal system, where peasants were basically tied to their lord's land, started falling apart. Lords who tried to keep the old ways found themselves facing something unprecedented: organized peasant revolts. In England, this led to the famous Peasants' Revolt of 1381, where common folk actually marched on London demanding rights. This was a massive shift. For the first time in centuries, the working class had real economic power. The Black Death forced medieval society to rethink everything they thought they knew about medicine and disease. While doctors still clung to theories about bad air and unbalanced humors, some pioneering minds began making crucial observations. They noticed the disease spread through close contact, and that isolating sick people actually worked. This led to the creation of the first hospitals dedicated to infectious diseases and the practice of separating patients by illness. Doctors started keeping detailed records of symptoms and treatments, laying the groundwork for modern medical research. Universities began performing more autopsies, leading to better understanding of human anatomy. Though they didn't discover bacteria, these medieval physicians were taking the first steps towards scientific medicine. They were moving away from superstition and toward observation-based healing, a revolutionary shift that would eventually lead to modern medical science. The Black Death taught medieval cities some harsh lessons about public health that changed urban living forever. Venice led the charge by creating the world's first quarantine system. Ships had to anchor offshore for 40 days before anyone could step on land. Cities started implementing serious cleaning programs, with workers assigned to cart away garbage and animal carcasses. Some towns even created special health boards to monitor disease outbreaks and enforce new hygiene rules. In Milan, officials would brick up houses with plague victims inside, extreme by today's standards, but it actually helped limit the spread. Public bathhouses, once popular social spots, were closed when people realized they might be spreading disease. Local governments began paving streets to make them easier to clean and building sewers to manage waste. These changes laid the groundwork for modern public health systems, proving that sometimes the worst disasters can lead to the best innovations. After the devastation of the Black Death came an unexpected silver lining: the Renaissance. With fewer people around, survivors had access to more resources per person. This wealth, combined with shifting social structures, created perfect conditions for cultural rebirth. Artists and scholars found wealthy patrons eager to fund their work. Cities like Florence became hotbeds of creativity, where thinkers questioned old ideas and explored new ones. The plague had shown that traditional authorities didn't have all the answers, encouraging people to seek knowledge through observation and reason. Universities expanded, literacy rates improved, and new technologies like the printing press helped spread ideas faster than ever before. It's fascinating. The same disaster that nearly destroyed medieval Europe ended up sparking one of history's greatest cultural revolutions. Thanks for joining this journey through one of history's most transformative events. The Black Death reshaped everything from medicine to art. If you found this fascinating, hit that like button, subscribe for more historical deep dives, and share with your history-loving friends.